Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm your host, Ben Anderson. We are 1 week away from the Utah Jazz actually opening up fall camp, training camp. It is September 22nd right now. They open up on the 29th. That's when Media Day will be. We'll have all of your coverage at KSLSports.com, as well as 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. And then, of course, right here, as always, on the Jazz Notes podcast. And along those lines, I guess, because we don't know how long the days get to run. It's usually a pretty long day. We may not have a podcast next week reacting to everything, but at least we won't have one next Monday. If there's not one Monday, maybe we'll try and figure it out either Tuesday or Wednesday. But regardless, the season is a week away from kicking off, and we will have all the coverage for you. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, usually with Chandler Holt, but he's out today. Find him on Twitter at Holt Sports. I know the last month has been really inconsistent. I've been traveling. Chandler's out now. But obviously, with the season starting up, we're going to get back to having the podcast regularly every week. So appreciate everyone sticking through this. I know when you come to expect it and it doesn't show up in your podcast feed, it gets a little frustrating. So appreciate everybody as always. And again, you're going to get a lot of coverage as you do all the time right here on KSLSports.com. We will talk about some news and notes. There's not a ton going on. It's just kind of the quiet before the storm, other than a bunch of people are getting into town right now. And then this week we'll start getting more information coming out. Media training camp is this week. It's where the Jazz coaches and stuff kind of welcome the local media, and you play and you go through some drills, and then they play a scrimmage at the end. And I'm going to go over there Wednesday, I think is the plan. I don't think I'm going to be playing in the drills or the scrimmage. I didn't last year either, but I'm getting old, and I've done it several times, and it's always fun to do, but I'm washed. So I'm going to not subject myself to that if I don't have to. The other big piece of content you probably saw coming out, other than, Taylor Hendricks got his high school jersey retired, which continues to be a cool thing. Ace Bailey had that as well this summer. But is that a lot of the Jazz players are in town. Last week they were at Rice-Eccles Stadium, going up there and practicing up on the hill. And then, speaking of hills, they went and hiked Ensign Peak, which is not exactly the most daunting hike in all of Salt Lake City, but it's a great introductory hike. And as you saw, Ace Bailey, if you watched the video on the Utah Jazz Twitter, he said, this isn't my first hike in Utah. This is my first hike ever. And it's an opportunity to go up, and it's just above Capitol Hill, which, if you're not familiar with the geography of Salt Lake City, the Capitol is right downtown. It's just at the top of State Street, and then you go up another maybe mile above that a little further, and Ensign Peak's right up there, and it just allows you to see the entire valley. So it's a great peak, a great hike to kind of introduce people to the entire city. You can see everything, and so the Jazz have done that for several years in a row now. It seems to be a favorite. I don't know if you take the guys from OTAs or whoever's here working out for open gym, and you go out there and you run up the hill with them or walk up the hill with them and hang out as a bonding opportunity. It's something the Jazz have taken to. But I guess what was most interesting was who was there and who was not there. And the most interesting name that was there was Mo Bamba, who the Jazz, if you remember, acquired in a trade. Man, was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? I can't remember now at this point. But the Jazz had acquired Mo Bamba in a trade and then ended up waiving him before he ever took off, or trading him. And, he never played for the Jazz. And fans always liked him because he was a former top 10 pick and, had some moments with the Orlando Magic, but truthfully has never really become an NBA player. But regardless, that's not a bit of news that I'd seen anywhere. I'd certainly not heard that Mo Bamba was going to be with the team. And so to see him at training camp with the Jazz, or not even at training camp, just at the hike with the Jazz, certainly turned some heads. And Mo is so tall and so long, it was pretty obvious that it was him right away. I will say I have reached out. It was in February the Jazz acquired Mo Bamba in that P.J. Tucker trade where the Jazz got P.J. Tucker for Drew Eubanks, and then they just waived everybody. So I've reached out to some people outside of the Jazz and have not heard back on Mo Bamba in any official role with the Jazz, so we will see. I think he's still young enough. I imagine he would want to play. I don't think he's joining the Jazz the way Sagana Diop did in a coaching role. But I would imagine he's trying to find a roster somewhere and trying to find a fit somewhere. But I don't know yet. We don't have any official update on that, so don't aggregate that he's joined the Jazz for training camp, other than he was in town and did hike up Ensign Peak with the team. Other names that were there, and I'm just kind of piecing together some of the videos that the Jazz sent out and some of the players sent out, but guys I definitely recognize were there, and you see a common theme here. Ace Bailey, Oscar Tshiebwe, Bryce Sensabaugh, Elijah Harkless, John Tonji, Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, Mo Bamba, as we mentioned, Cody Williams, Walt Clayton Jr., and Walker Kessler. For the most part, outside of Walker, I guess at this point, these are all, and he's still on his rookie contract, these are the young guys. This is the young roster that's all there. Keontae's in his third season now. Taylor's in his third season now. Bryce in his third season now. But this is the young group of players. And then I guess a little bit notable who wasn't there, though certainly no cause for concern. Lowry wasn't there, but Will Hardy had an appearance at the mall over the weekend, and Lowry was there just getting back from Eurobasket, so Lowry is back in Salt Lake City. Kevin Love was not there. Again, all the reports seem to be that Kevin Love is not going to report to the Jazz, or at least is not going to be on the team this season, so no surprise he wasn't there. No Kyle Anderson yet. And actually, the Jazz never really announced Kyle Anderson. If I remember, they never did the, welcome to Utah, here's the trade, here's you in your official jersey. But they did send out a happy birthday Kyle Anderson tweet over the weekend, so there is some acknowledgement that he is an NBA player still and is a member of the Utah Jazz. Isaiah Collier, I did not see in the photo or any of the videos, and I did not see Kyle Filipowski in the photo or the videos, but both of them were up at Rice-Eccles Stadium last week, so they're in town and maybe doing whatever they have to do. But I did not see them on the hike specifically. Maybe they were taking the photos or something. No George Niang. Haven't seen him yet. I did not see KJ Martin. Again, KJ Martin's a veteran, but he's probably closer to being in the young core than he is, the veteran group. And his contract is non-guaranteed, so we'll see if and when he shows up with the Jazz. Didn't see Svi Mikhailuk and didn't see Yusuf Nurkic either. But again, Kevin Love, Lowry, Kyle Anderson, George Niang, Svi, and Nurkic are all veteran guys. We'll see who shows up. We'll see who's in that group. I fully expect Kyle Anderson to be here. I don't know if I ever expect to see Kevin Love in Utah. We know Lowry's going to be around. We know George is going to be around. We know Svi's going to be around. We know Nurkic is going to be around. I guess that leaves Kevin Love and KJ Martin. We'll see what happens this week, and if we start seeing their faces around a little bit more. I've not seen them yet here, but I could have missed something. Otherwise, that's kind of it with the news for the Utah Jazz right now. Not a lot of pressing big information other than camp is coming up. It's going to start a week from today. I think the familiar faces will be there, and it's going to be a young core for the Jazz. And I got some questions about that in the mailbag, so we'll address it there. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to your mailbag questions. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm your host, Ben Anderson. All right, as always, follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky. I like to send out a prompt every Monday at about 11 o'clock asking for your mailbag questions. And we're late in the offseason. There's not a ton going on, so there's not as many questions as some weeks, but that I'm sure will start to pick up. Let's start with Blue Sky. First, Jared Crookston, since we were just talking about the hike in the last segment, says, seeing a little video the Jazz posted about taking all the players on the Ensign Peak hike reminded me of Rudy and how he used to post about hiking all the time. Are you aware of any other current Jazz players that go on occasional hikes around Salt Lake City today? Rudy was unique because, A, he owned a house here, which is not super common. Most of the guys are young, single, and they rent, or even if they're not single, they don't have families, so they don't necessarily need to have a home. That's not the case for everybody, but most of the guys aren't single and owning a home. And Rudy was single and owned a home in the mountains, so it was really convenient for him to go out by himself and hike around. And then Rudy loved to send out videos of him with his shirt off. Rudy was pretty vain and liked everyone to see how good a shape he was in, and that was a charm about Rudy. But Rudy loved to post videos about his hiking. I'm trying to think of what I know about these players as outdoorsmen. Lowry's a fisherman, so I know he likes to go out and fish a little bit. I haven't heard a ton about players being run into hiking. Maybe Walker a little bit, but I honestly could be making that up. I haven't seen that. I haven't heard about that a whole lot yet, so we will see. Who's been interesting is John Tonji. Just seems to be really out and about. His first day in Utah after he got drafted, he went to the X Games at the fairgrounds. I know he went to the RSL game last week or yesterday, over the weekend or whenever it was. I know he was at the RSL game. I think it was last week. He's just kind of a dude who's out and about, and it's funny because he's 23, 24 years old, whatever it is. He's a very old rookie, but he seems to really be enjoying his life as a non-19-year-old who can see the city and probably has a little bit of money in his pocket for the first time and can kind of enjoy being out and about. So I'm excited to get to know him a little bit and see what he is. I wouldn't be surprised if Oscar Sheway was a hiker, but again, Oscar didn't know he was going to be in Utah until a little bit later in the summer. So it's a good question. I don't know. I will honestly, I'll ask around. I'll figure out who's out and doing what. And I know the guys certainly enjoy Salt Lake. I don't seem to get any impression that anyone's unhappy about the city that they live in or being here in Utah, and they are up to their ears in basketball most of the time. So it's an easy opportunity to come in and focus on basketball and not have to do too much else there. Next, we'll go to my DMs over at Twitter. Dan, who always likes to send a DM. Again, my DMs are always open, especially on Twitter. So if you just want to send a question in at any point in the week, I will make sure I bookmark it and come back and answer it on the podcast. That's the easiest way to do it. Dan asks, the biggest upset in Jazz history that we were on the right end of, and B, what's the biggest choke job in Jazz history? Well, I get the Jazz do have still, I think, the biggest comeback in NBA history. They were down, whatever it was, 30 points plus at halftime to the Denver Nuggets and came back and won that series, or won that game. But Denver was bad and the Jazz were good. The fact that the Jazz pushed the Lakers, 7 games? In the late 80s, when that was still kind of like the Magic Johnson Lakers, was nearly the biggest upset. You know what? Some of their first early playoff series wins, like they won a playoff series their first year that they ever made the playoffs as a franchise. That had to be a pretty big deal. Beating the Rockets on the road in a closeout game in Game 6 was a really big deal. That was obviously very impressive from the Jazz and John Stockton hitting the shot there. The Jazz beating the Thunder in Donovan Mitchell's first year. Again, going into that season, now it's easy to look back and realize like kind of all the flaws that roster had, but it was Russell Westbrook, it was Paul George, and it was Carmelo Anthony. I mean, the narrative going into that postseason series was that the Thunder had the 3 best players on the floor, and some of the ways you can kind of break down, like shorthand for breaking down playoff series is like just put all the players in a draft, and if you were to draft them 1 through 10, does one team have 4 of the first 5? Does one team have 7 of the top 10? If that's the case, that's pretty obvious who's going to win the series. And I think, honestly, if you had gone back to that series, you probably would have taken maybe Paul George 1 or Russell Westbrook 1, the other one 2nd, and then maybe Carmelo 3rd. And the Jazz ended up having the 2 best players on the floor in the series in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. So that was pretty shocking. That was a huge upset. And I know, in retrospect, that Thunder team didn't end up being very good, and our view on how talented or how impactful of a winner Russell Westbrook actually is has changed. I think Carmelo was out of the league pretty quickly after that. Paul George has always been super talented, never won at a super high level after his injury in Indiana. So there's a little bit different context on that, but really the Jazz winning that series kind of shook them up. I mean, it's kind of the reason why those guys have those narratives that they do. And then on the flip side of that question, what's the biggest choke in Jazz history? I mean, you got to think being up 2-0 against the Clippers with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, Kawhi Leonard going out, Jazz having the best record in the NBA that season, and not losing 4 straight games, and essentially, putting the nail in the coffin of that era of that team that should have been as good as they were, was a really, really bad choke. I mean, you're up 2-0 in a series. You should win the series, especially when the opposing team loses their best player. And I know the Jazz had injuries too, and Donovan was dealing with an ankle, and Mike Conley was out with the hamstring injury. But, they were up, 25 points in the second half of that game in Game 6, and Terrence Mann goes off and hits all the threes. Like that's a huge choke. That was just an absolutely ridiculous choke by the Jazz. So that's nothing's unforgivably bad in sports, but that's about as bad as it gets. That's a huge choke, not just for the series itself, but the individual game, the closeout game there, not being able to send that back to Salt Lake City was pretty ridiculous. And I think Game 5 was in Salt Lake, and Paul George just torched him. They just didn't have any answer for Paul George at all. It was bad. It was a really bad performance by that Jazz team. So that would, in my opinion, other than there were some early '90s teams where Jazz thought they would maybe go to the conference finals and get further than they did, and they choked away those. They had some bad series losses there. They almost lost to the Mutombo-led Denver Nuggets and survived that. But in my time covering the team, certainly that loss to the Clippers was pretty rough, and one that did not permanent damage, but very long-term damage to the team. And I guess you could say permanent if it was, the beginning of the end for Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell as a unit. All right, other questions, just to my prompt on Twitter. Jimbo says, do you think the Jazz will ever bring back Derek Fisher for a reunion visit, or do you think they're still upset about how he lied to get out of his contract? I believe he lied to 3 teams, Jimbo. I don't know if you've ever seen that detail before, but that's a part of it. I don't think Derek Fisher's welcome anywhere. And I'll tell you why that's so funny. Again, talking about, a colored history, and now Jimbo has honestly played a role in like how fans will always remember Derek Fisher. You kind of think of him as this bad guy, and Jimbo, I know you're around long enough to know what the actual story was. Like, I will tell you, and I've mentioned this before, my friend in high school, I'll just say stepdad for shorthand, mom's boyfriend, was a Jazz beat writer, and so I was just always peppering him with questions about basketball and the NBA and the Jazz, and I remember the Jazz signed Derek Fisher, and I was like, oh, what's that about? And he told me, well, Derek Fisher might be the best guy in the NBA. Derek Fisher's the best quote in the NBA. He's the best locker room guy. Like, it's such a huge deal to bring in a leader of that quality, even though, like, Derek Fisher was never a great player. You go back and you can look at his stats. He's kind of inefficient, small, feisty, but not like a great player. Was certainly just kind of feeding off of Kobe and Shaq, and those were loaded rosters, and he was a role player, but he wasn't a particularly great player ever. But the kind of reputation was like, oh, coach on the floor, awesome adjusted person who's going to show young guys how to adapt. And actually he did a little bit of that with the Jazz. I don't want to pretend that didn't happen with Darren Williams. But, when they signed him, the thought was he was going to be this great guy. And now he's just kind of a pariah. He's a pariah in a lot of places. His second act of his career has been truly, the flip and the unexpected of what a lot of people probably thought was going to happen. So it's not great for him. And it's really kind of a surprise in that sense. All right, CJ Real Hoops on Twitter says, how many points, it's kind of a three-parter, how many points does Ace Bailey need to average per game for the following scenarios? 1, he's a future star. B, he's right where he needs to be. And C, he's in danger of being a bust. I would probably, it's a hard number to say, because, like, what did Cody Williams average last year? And everyone decided to write Cody Williams off, and then I thought he had a really good summer league. And look, Cody's still a ways away. I don't expect a ton from Cody this year still. Cody was at 4.6 points per game, and the really damaging numbers were that he was at 32%. He shot 32% from the floor and 25% from three. Like, it was really rough. For Ace, considering his opportunity, it would just be really surprising if Ace can't score. It's 6'7", 6'9" in shoes, as big as he plays. I know his body is not like way, way better than Cody Williams, but it's better than Cody Williams. I just think he's a more talented player than Cody was. He's a higher draft pick than Cody was. He's a higher recruit than Cody was, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I expect Ace to be in double digits his first season. I just think that's going to be there. And look, to relitigate a little bit of Cody's first season, and I know you didn't ask about Cody at all, so I'm sorry to flip this conversation into a Cody conversation. Like, in most scenarios, if your rookie, regardless of where they were drafted, was struggling as badly as Cody Williams was, the Jazz would have just let him go play in the G League all year. Every other team would have just let him go play in the G League all year and try and work on his game that way and see how much better he can get. But the Jazz did not have very much depth. They were not a very good team. They were not trying to be a good team. And then, kind of in a difficult way for Cody, it was like the way to lose games when it was close was to put Cody on the floor. And you were going to lose the game because Cody was not ready to be in the NBA right now. So you put him out there and you kind of sandbag games that way. You purposely put yourself in a situation to not win games. And that's really hard to put on a player like Cody Williams. But in a sense, he was playing the role the Jazz were asking him to play, or were he was fulfilling the role the Jazz put him in successfully. Now, that doesn't mean his season was successful, but the Jazz were trying to lose games, and the best way to do it was to have a guy on the floor that made him play 4-on-5 the entire time. And that's exactly what was going on. So I don't think they will do that again with a player, period. And I certainly don't think they will do it with Ace Bailey, that was just a little bit sacrificial, it felt like, at times last year. And that's unfortunate for Cody, and it changed, I think, the perspective on him, where ideally he would have just been in better spots, put in better spots to succeed, and they didn't really give him that opportunity. They will put Ace in better spots to succeed. They will protect him more. He will be playing with different types of players that maybe benefit him, and then he should just be better than Cody in general. So ideally he has a better impact, and I think he's probably more carved out and prepared for the NBA game than Cody was. So I would say for him to be a future star, like, I don't really think for the most part you can tell that after the first season. Now, Donovan Mitchell averaged 20 points per game, and again, Cody averaged 4 points a game. It's really remarkable how good Donovan was his first year. 4 points a game from Cody, or what did I say, 6 points a game from Cody, 4.6 points per game from Cody, compared to Donovan Mitchell averaging 20 points a year. Donovan was a fluke and a total anomaly and was awesome. So I would not expect that from Ace. Now, if Ace scores 20 points a game his rookie season, I'm going to have a hard time thinking that that's not going to be a star. That with what he does, if he's able to score that many points that early, stardom is in his future in one fashion or another. But I think if he's less than 10 points per game, you're probably thinking, oh, well, that might be a little bit underwhelming. If he's at 9.5 points per game, you certainly don't need to sound the alarm. What does he have to be at to be in danger of being a bust? Yeah, like 6 points a game, 5 points a game, and just doesn't have it at all. Doesn't seem to be able to put the ball anywhere near the hoop and doesn't seem to have any other skills. The hard part, again, for Cody last year, and I think we're going to draw a lot of comparisons just between Cody and Ace's seasons, is the number of times you'd look at Cody's box score and it was just, cardio. It was 0 rebounds, 0 steals, 0 assists, 1 of 6 shooting. It was just like, wow, there were a lot of games where he didn't find a way to go and make an impact at all. It's why, again, I think the two things that were most impressive about Ace Bailey's Summer League, if you've forgotten, I know he only played 2 games, and really only had 1 impressive game, but it was the no-dip 3, where he catches the ball in the corner. He recognized that, like, oh, man, I'm not getting a shot off like I was at Rutgers. And, in college, I can get it off over I'm bigger than everybody. Defenses are terrible. These guys aren't good basketball players, so I can take 10 minutes and shoot it when I want. That's why he took so many contested shots. He could do whatever he wanted, and they were good shots still. And he realized, I can't do that in the NBA, and he adjusted immediately, like on the fly. Like that was impressive. And then when he wasn't getting the ball, because you're not playing with good point guards for the most part in Summer League play, and some of that was the case. I didn't think Isaiah Collier was particularly dynamic, and we didn't see a ton from Walt Clayton in those first few games. I thought he got better in Vegas before the injury. Ace was like, well, if I'm not getting the ball, I'm gonna go get the ball. And he just went out and started going and getting the ball on those offensive rebounds and then putting it back for the dunks. He just had a lot of games where it was just like, man, I'm gonna go be around. I'm gonna make a play. And if you play ball the right way, you will be rewarded. And I thought that's what was so impressive about Ace Bailey's second game, was he was playing the right way. He was going out and creating his own opportunities. He was respecting the game and getting rebounds as a result. And when you get rebounds, you get points because you get putbacks. And when you get putbacks, you get dunks, you get a rhythm. And when you get a rhythm, you can start making threes. And that's where I thought Ace was so impressive, really in the one game, but it was one of the two that we saw. To go back to Cody last year, he had, let me see if I can do this quickly. I'll sort this quickly. He had 21 games, and he only played 50, so nearly half of his games, 21 of 50, 40%, more than 40%. He had 1 or fewer rebounds. Just like, that's a lot. That's a lot of games to not be making an impact, and 31 games, so more than half when he had 2 or fewer. That's a big difference. And you go back and you actually look at some of the games when he had more impressive outings. He rarely had good scoring games when he wasn't rebounding, and that's not necessarily because he wasn't doing, offensive or getting offensive rebounds and getting putbacks, but it's like, yeah, you're just involved. You're kind of checked into the game. He had his best game of the year last year. It was, let me see if I can figure out exactly how many points he had here. He had 8 points. He had 8 rebounds and 5 assists, and that was in a loss to Portland, in a close loss. He did that in 26 minutes. It's like, I think Cody has the physical tools to go out and get 5 rebounds, and I know he can pass the ball, so he can get 3 or 4 assists. And if you do that, you find that rhythm. You're involved in the game. You're kind of not thinking, you're just playing, and you should be able to put some numbers up. And I think that's what we're going to see from Ace. I think we're going to see just production. So, actually, you know what? CJ Real Hoops on Twitter. Let me switch it up. I might be looking more at like kind of some of the other stuff. Is he rebounding? Because he was actually an awesome rebounder at Rutgers. I know some people try to dismiss it as he was like stealing rebounds. It's like, well, no, he's playing with horrible teammates. His coworkers at Rutgers, other than Dylan Harper, were truly atrocious. So he was going out there and fighting for rebounds and getting rebounds. And yeah, he's bigger and more athletic than everybody. Fine. He's going to be bigger and more athletic than a lot of people in the NBA too. Go get those rebounds. So I'd keep an eye on some of that stuff. Is he getting 4 rebounds, 6 rebounds, 8 rebounds? Does he have a 12-rebound night out of nowhere? That might be more of a sign that, like, there's a real player here versus just like, he's going to score 20. I think he probably is going to score 30 at some point in his rookie season. It's hard to do, but remember, Kyle Filipowski did it. But again, Flip's scoring numbers are great. Go back and look at some of his big assist games, his big rebounding games. That's what's going to keep him on the floor in the NBA. And I think Ace is probably going to mirror that more similarly. All right, James McKinney says, any idea how the front office feels about the Kawhi Leonard situation? I don't. I haven't talked to anyone about it. Maybe I'll get the opportunity this week, and I'll be curious if anyone says anything about it. A lot of people probably just wait to see what the NBA says before they, I don't think anyone's going to say anything about it anyways. There's kind of a line. Coaches don't really talk about other coaches. Front offices don't really talk about other front offices very often. Ownership doesn't talk about ownership. I'm sure it's frustrating. I'm sure it's annoying to see a guy with $150 billion certainly looking like he's circumventing the cap. Again, if you haven't really paid attention to the Kawhi Leonard situation, just seems like the Clippers, through this fake company, or not fake company, but a company that turned out to be a scam and was, went bankrupt and is getting sued by several people. It seems like, at least went to bankruptcy court, was paying Kawhi Leonard with money that may have been provided by Steve Ballmer, the other owner of the Clippers, the other owner of the Clippers, I should say. They kept kind of funding this company, not entirely, certainly, but cutting them big checks even when it seemed like the company was dying, and Kawhi kept getting paid because Kawhi had signed a huge endorsement deal with this company, despite the fact never endorsing them, never really doing any of the work to plant trees, which is what this company's business was. So it was a no-show job Kawhi was drawing huge money from, and that company was drawing money from the Clippers ownership. So I'm sure it's frustrating. I'm sure it's a bit of an annoying thing. And I know, look, the Jazz recognize that they are trying to sell a cold mountain town in a league that can sell L.A., beaches, Northern California, South Beach, New York City, Toronto even, which is a cold town, but it's a great city. I've never been there, but, it's one of the major cities in the world. Like Dallas is warm all the time. Orlando's warm all the time. The Jazz are fighting uphill constantly, and I'm sure they feel like that gets only more difficult when they're going up against teams that may be, trying to play against the rules or bend the rules to their will. All right, last question. Steven Ritter says, if I were hired today to run the Jazz, what's your first move? It's a good question. I kind of agree. I like a lot of the things from a fan perspective that Ryan Smith has done. Now, I will admit that I have real blind spots there, okay? And I'll give you some personal experience. So, because I don't experience the game as a fan, there are certain just casual experiences that you might have that I don't have going to the games. So I fully acknowledge that. I go to the game and I get to eat in the media center or the media that they provide, which last year was great. It was in the Toyota Club, which was really nice. And there's plenty of tables and the food's good, and they let us sit down there, and they had to make that change kind of last minute because of the reconstruction of the Delta Center, because the Utah Mammoth were moving in. So there wasn't the traditional media dining room. But even then, I eat before the games, and it's easy, and the food was always, fine, and there was plenty of rooms to sit because I was down underneath. Now, before the season last year, or kind of early on before they figured out they were just going to do Toyota Club all year, they were giving us food vouchers. So we could go and eat at any of the, these 4 different places around the concourse. And you could get your food and go and sit at the table and eat. And that was all great for me. And that's where I guess I did experience it. But last Sunday, I went to the Tennessee Titans game. I traveled to Nashville. I went to the game. Tickets were really cheap. I thought, okay, this could be fun. I've never been to an NFL game before. I don't get to go to a lot of sporting events as a fan. I don't have any rooting interest here. This will be fun. And the experience was truly bad. Now, other than it's fun to go watch people who are at the top of their game play at this level, not that you can say that about anyone with the Tennessee Titans, but I went to the game as a fan, and the video board stunk at Nissan Stadium, and there's no place to stand in the concourse and eat your food, and there's certainly no picnic tables or benches or tables wrapped around some of the big the big cement poles and infrastructure to have a place to even stand and eat, which you get a ton of at the Jazz games. There were people just sitting on the floor in the concourse with food next to them, and they just looked like, are they passed out? Are they intoxicated? Are they unwelcome here? It was such a bad experience, even visually, of where people were eating food, that it was hard to imagine. It was hard to fathom. And I remember thinking, man, the Jazz would never do this. Ryan Smith would never let this happen, and the Millers would have never let this happen. So in that sense, I guess I have some blind spots as far as like what is the fan experience that fans don't like. I know parking is not ideal right now, and they're building that big parking lot now behind Delta Center, which should open up some spots around the city. And you can always park at City Creek or you can park at Gateway, and I know you got to pay for it. But, man, I'll tell you, the Titans stink. And I walked in because I was staying at a hotel. It was maybe a half an hour walk away. And I stopped and got food on the way. And I was still about 20-minute walk away. And the parking started to be $50 a spot. Like, is there a $50 parking outside of the Jazz? Like, I know there's some 40s. It's not like it's cheap to park there. I'm not pretending it is, but like even the biggest issue of parking, it's like, okay, you go park in front of West High and you walk 10 minutes, 15 minutes and you're at the arena, and it's free at that point. I think if you park over by West High. I know there's certainly spots to park, and I don't think you're paying $40 to park at City Creek or to park at Gateway if that's what you're choosing to do. So in that sense, I think some of the practical stuff is easy. I know it's harder to get to Utah Mammoth games right now. They're brand new. There weren't a lot of seats last year. I know that's a different animal than what the Jazz are, but this is a Jazz podcast. On the court, what would I do? I don't know. And I'm sure that's more of what you're interested in versus like what I think how you would improve the fan experience. I don't necessarily think, it'd be hard to go back and say, like, what draft picks would I have made over the ones they made and how much would I have done it differently. Again, they know so much more about it than I get to. I certainly have the players I like, and I'm open about it leading up to the draft, and I try and break them down the way I can. I would have done the Ace Bailey draft pick, absolutely. I probably would have maybe even tried to be more aggressive to move up to get him if I thought that was on the table. But I thought Ace was good. We'll see what they do with Lowry Markkanen. Why I guess I'm maybe capitulating on this a little bit to the Jazz already is that I think Danny Ainge is good at his job. Like, I think Justin Zanuck's good at his job. Like, I think when I look at what they have done so far, they've done a nice job. If you could have in a perfect world, go back and say, well, maybe you trade Rudy, get pieces, whether that's the same Minnesota trade or somewhere else, and you try and say, hey, Donovan, I know you may not want to be here. I know you may prefer to be traded at this point. Let's give it a year with you as the star and the face of our franchise with some new pieces around you, and maybe you find some new people that you like on the team, and the team can still succeed, and there's better chemistry, and you've got a little bit more power, a little bit more control. Can we do for you what has happened for him in Cleveland now, where it seems like he's going to be a long-term member of the Cavaliers? Maybe. And then you have to ask yourself, is that what you want? The Cleveland Cavaliers can't get past the second round right now. Is that what Jazz fans want? Do you want Donovan repeating the success he had the first two seasons? I get that that's more fun than what you've been through as a fan since he was traded, but that's also a different headache. I mean, the reason why I think some Jazz fans were optimistic about those trades in the first place is because they were sick of just that cycle of, okay, you're a good regular season team, you get to the second round and nothing matters. You've just unloaded that pain, though different than what you have now, to the Cleveland Cavaliers who have to ask that same question. So I don't know. I don't know how much I would do differently on the court. Probably a lot if I had all the information in front of me, but I think at this point I know enough to say I don't. I think Will Hardy's the right guy. I think Will Hardy's a very good coach. I think he's done a good job. I loved Walt Clayton in the draft, and they drafted Walt Clayton, and I loved Ace Bailey in the draft. They drafted Ace Bailey, so they've done some things well that I think are probably things that I would have done similarly, and they've probably, I would have drafted Taylor Hendricks at that point too. I think that's probably the guy who on the board, if he was there, I probably would have taken him. Would I have taken Cam Whitmore over Keontae George? Maybe. You know what I mean? But is Cam Whitmore way better than Keontae George? He's on his second team, and Keontae George is not. And I wasn't a big Cam Whitmore guy, but I kind of bought into the hype. If he's still on the board at whatever the Jazz drafted Keontae at 15, maybe he's worth a swing there. Truth is, like, Ime Udoka is a good coach, and I know that Houston Rockets team is loaded, but Ime Udoka couldn't find a way to use Cam Whitmore either and traded him to Washington. And, you guys have paid attention to basketball. Nothing the Washington Wizards do matters. So is anything Cam Whitmore, does anything he does this year matter? Probably not. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of what, you would have liked to have gotten more for Colin Sexton. You would have liked to have gotten more for John Collins. The Jazz tried. They wanted to get more. So, no, it's a good question, Steven. I try to not frame how I cover the team in that fashion so much. I might have done that a little bit more when I was younger on the beat. And I think the more I know, the more I realize that I know very little in some of that sense of why you make the decisions you make. And that the people who are operating. And I'll tell you this, I've had this conversation with Ryan Smith himself because, basically what you're asking me is if I was Ryan Smith, because it's his job to run the team. In some conversations I've had with Ryan specifically, he has said interesting things like, what you don't realize is the other 29 teams in the NBA have really smart front offices too. Like, everybody's good at this. Danny's really good at this. I think Austin Ainge is going to be really good at this. Justin Zanuck's good at this. So is everybody else in every front office for the most part. There are question marks. There have been notoriously horrendous GMs and front office members and execs in the past. But for the most part, everyone's good at their job, which is why they have jobs in the NBA. And it's hard to beat them when you're all working with the same pool of players and the same types of assets. So I guess maybe that's what you're that's the difficulty of doing that job. All right, that will do it. I'm sorry we didn't get more questions today. I get it. The podcast has not been as consistent as I would like it to be, and that's entirely my fault over the last month, just with some traveling before the season comes back. But a week from today will be training camp. Media Day opens. We'll have all your coverage on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I think both Chandler and I are going to be there. I know I'm going to be there, and we'll be covering it at KSLSports.com as well. I think Chandler's going to be there. As long as everything works out there. So we will have a lot of coverage live on social media, on the radio. We got to broadcast there live last year, which was really cool and really fun, and I thought successful for us and for the Jazz, so I hope they let us do that again coming up next week. But regardless, we'll have a lot of sound from the podium and let you hear from those players. And we'll be back with you with a podcast at some point, hopefully next week. I guess there's a chance it's 2 weeks from now, but I would like to, with the season opening up, actually get back into a podcast for you, even if it's not on Monday, because it would conflict with Media Day itself. Find me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. You can find Chandler at Seahold Sports. Same with Blue Sky. Read us at KSLSports.com, and we will be back with you soon.